And the Lord appeared unto Isaac and said, Dwell in this land, and I will be with you and bless you. For to you and your descendants I give all these lands, and I will perform the oath which I swore to your father Abraham. And I will make your descendants multiply as the stars of heaven, and in your seed all the nations of the earth shall be blessed. Sons of promise, Isaac and Jacob.
Shalom and welcome to our program. I'm Miles Weiss.
And I'm Catherine Weiss.
And we are continuing our series, Sons of Promise, Isaac and Jacob. This is really the continuation of the story of Abraham and his continuing story that comes through the generations, dor v'dor, it says in Hebrew, and really how God is always intended to bring a blessing to the earth through the line of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob.
Yeah, not Ishmael, because God blessed Ishmael,
Yes.
but the covenant came through Isaac.
Yes.
And it's always my heartbeat to pray for the people,
Yes.
the Arab people.
Yes.
But it's very important to me to draw this distinction
Yes.
that Islam and Allah are not the same and did not originate from Abraham.
Yes.
And Allah is not the same as Yahweh,
Yes.
Savior, Jehovah our God.
It's really true, and it's hard to say these days. It's politically incorrect to say that the God of the Quran and the God of the Bible are not the same, but that's the truth.
Well, that's the lines that are being blurred. They
Yes.
want to say that Abraham's the father of all three of these religions when Abraham is not the father of Islam.
That's right.
Ishmael is from the lineage
Yes.
of Abraham,
Yes.
but God did not birth
Right.
Islam.
Yeah, it was a veering away from the original intention of the book and the intention of the heart of God, which is always redemptive, always salvation-oriented. And so we see that throughout this.
And by the way, I mean, if you talk to any Muslim person, they know that Allah is not the same as Yahweh.
Yeah.
That's why they're fighting against the Jews and the Christians.
Exactly. So let's go immediately to our story. We're picking up the Bible story where we find out once again that this story is, the story of salvation is to the Jews and through the Jews to whosoever. So let's go to the story of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob in the Sons of Promise.
Isaac's father, Abraham, lived a long, full life and died at the age of 175. And Abraham's sons, Isaac and Ishmael, buried their father in the cave of Machpelah, in the field that Abraham had purchased from the Hittites. It was here that Sarah had also been buried. Years ago, God had spoken to Abraham about his two sons. As for Ishmael, I have blessed him, and will make him fruitful, and will multiply him exceedingly. 12 princes shall he beget, and I will make him a great nation. But my covenant will I establish with Isaac, an everlasting covenant, and with his seed after him.
We're coming to a pivotal part of the story because the Sons of Promise really needs to make a distinction between the line of Ishmael and the line of Isaac. This is so important because Ishmael is blessed, but the covenant God makes with Isaac. In fact, even back in Genesis 17, he says, Ve'et beriti akim et Yitzchak, my covenant I will make with Isaac.
Right. You know, all these children of Abraham are not necessarily the line for which God ordained the son to be born through. Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob are the ordained line because of their faith and their obedience.
Yes. And you know, God blessed Ishmael. He gave him incredible wealth. He gave him 12 sons. And we know that today it's the sons of Ishmael that are sitting on top of the oil wealth of the world. Right. It's not like he said, I'm cursing you. No, 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 no. There's a blessing to Ishmael, but there's a requirement. Just as there is for any other son, there's a requirement to come in through the door of the greater son, Yeshua.
Right.
And for Ishmael, that's what faces him, is making that decision. here's the covenant promise to Isaac. I'm going to give you generations like the sands of the earth, the Jewish people, and the stars of the sky, the Christians, the believers who are grafted in, and the land itself. This land, Ha-Eretz, the land, has been given to the sons of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. And that's a very strong distinction that we'll be drawing out during this program. It's very important.
Yeah, we'll see later on how out of Ishmael came a whole new religion, and it's Islam, and it's not the same. Even though they might be the same tribe of Shem or come from the same people group, but Islam, Christianity, and Judaism are not the same. So we as Christians and as Jews need to make that distinction even more today. We need to know what God's plan is, and we need to stand with it so that they can have eternal security, not just something that's aloof and something far off, and maybe a hope so if I do some drastic thing. But God has a plan for all people groups. He ordained it through Abraham because he heard the call, he responded, he obeyed, and he went. And he established God's Son, God's plan through Yeshua HaMashiach.
That's right. It is available. The covenant blessing is available through the grafting in. If the sons of Ishmael will say yes to Yeshua, they will be grafted in, and they'll join us, Jew and Christian, together with the love of God, because Yeshua is the heir of all things. According to Hebrews chapter 1, verse 2, he's the heir of all things. But then Romans 8:17 goes on to say that we are joint heirs with him. In other words, we get the blessing of the firstborn because of our faith in Yeshua HaMashiach, and that's available to the sons of Ishmael. It's almost a plea. You know, you can hear it in my voice. I'm pleading with the sons of Ishmael to reconsider this other religion and this other pathway and this other God that they're serving, and to allow themselves to believe into the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Is not Allah. He is the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and the way to him is through Yeshua HaMashiach. And that's our prayer today, that the sons of Ishmael would join those of the sons of Isaac and those grafted in that are joint heirs with Mashiach. We'll be back after this. Shalom, Miles here. You know, people see the quality of these programs and they think, oh, they've got plenty of money, maybe some church or a large organization behind them. That is not the case. You know, we're completely dependent on gifts from viewers like you, especially for airtime, which is our most important expense. Thank you for standing with us, especially as we see the day approaching. Messiah is coming soon, and we want to be able to bring you these messages as we see the day approaching. Thank you, and shalom.
זה בטח יעבור להם. הם תמיד רבים ביניהם. לא משנה מה שאני אומר, תמיד פורץ ביניהם ויכוח.
כל זה יעבור. אלוהים אמר שהבנים יהיו לשני לאומים. אחד יהיה חזק יותר מהשני, והבכור ישרת את הצעיר.
אפילו בלידה הם נאבקו. יעקב נאחז בעשיו.
זה הסימן. יעקב הוא שורד.
We really see the wrestling in the womb come to pass in all of life as the story of Isaac and Ishmael unfolds before us. Behind me you see the Dome of the Rock and the Al-Aqsa Mosque. We're here where the Muslims have taken over what is the Temple Mount, the place where Abraham offered up Isaac, a holy place in Judaism. And we really have a 4,000-year presence here, the Jews do. But the wrestling that the mom is relating to, it's even in the Hebrew language. The word for heel, the heel grabber, the word for heel is akeb, and then the word for twisting is akab, and out of that we get Yaakov or Jacob. There's a relationship, even in the language itself, between what is going on in the womb and what will take place through their lives, the lives of these twins. Remember that God is going to prophesy that the elder should serve the younger. Again, that's a statement that in order for Esau to come into the destiny, the ultimate destiny that he has, it will require an act of his will. He's going to have to come in through the same door that Jacob or anyone else comes in through, which is the door of the greater son, Yeshua HaMashiach. Isaac is a picture of the Son of God. He was a promised son. He was a miraculous son. And he really reminds us of the faith and obedience that we saw with Abraham. In fact, Isaac never leaves the land of Israel. He's there. It's a picture of the heavenlies. Canaan was a picture of the heavenly land, and Yeshua dwells in heaven. Isaac dwelt in Israel. There's a relationship between this promised son in the natural and the Son of God. There's a picture also here of the danger of nurturing a grudge. There was such insecurity on the part of Ishmael. He focused on who he was not. He was not Isaac, and therefore he felt unloved. He was loved. Abraham blessed him. God blessed him. But he felt unloved, and because of that, he had nurtured a grudge against his brother. And then it passed on to the next generation and the generation after that, and became hostility that we see being played out in the world today. Now, Ishmael lived to 137 years. He lived a long life. But we need to remind you that the religion that came from the sons of Ishmael, that came through Esau, and the sons of Esau, is not the same as the faith that you and I are walking in, the faith of the Son of God through Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and the book, the Bible. It's a different work. In fact, I have a pastor friend here, an Arab Christian pastor. He said, way back in the desert, we lost our brother, we lost our father, and we lost the God of our father. And so many of us today are serving a different God. This is a Christian Arab pastor openly saying that this other religion that has come in to usurp and to take place has drawn the Arab peoples away from the God of Abraham. And it's tragic, but there is a way back. And the way back is through Yeshua. Ishmael is going to live in Mecca. Mecca is going to become a holy place to the sons of Ishmael and to the religion of Islam. And in fact, Jerusalem is never mentioned in the Quran. It's mentioned over 700 times in the Bible. This is the desire of all nations, and it is the place that the Jewish people and the Christians look to for the return of the Lord. In fact, it's going to be on this mountain that Yeshua is going to return to. And we're looking forward to that. So let's go back to our show, and we're going to continue from here. We'll be right back.
יעקב נאחז בעשיו.
Israel, the land of God's covenant promises. Yes. It is a beautiful land. It is blooming in this day. We would love to host you on a tour. Come and see the Galilee. Come and see Jerusalem. Come and walk where Jesus walked.
Yes.
The Bible will come alive.
It's true. You know, you can get in touch with us at levitt.com or 1-800-WONDERS and come with us. We've heard pastors tell us that, oh my gosh, why wasn't this 35 years ago in seminary? They come and they realize how much the Bible comes alive. You know, we'd love to have you stay up to date with us here at the ministry by receiving our free newsletter. I don't know if you're on our mailing list, but please get on it and receive the Levitt letter. It's a wonderful news magazine that brings you up to date regarding what's happening in Israel and also what's happening here at the ministry. Also, our resource this week is Israel's Right to the Land. I love this little booklet. It really goes methodically through the scriptural reasons why the line of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, Jacob, who is Israel, have a right to be in that place.
Yeah, God promised the land to Abraham, and his covenant was established through Isaac and then Jacob.
Yes.
You know, when Rebecca was pregnant, she was so curious, what is happening inside my womb? there was this wrestling. There were these two twins. And so she inquired before the Lord, it says in Genesis 25. And the Lord told her, you have two nations inside of your womb, and the older shall serve the younger. So this sets up, God already knew before man did anything, he knew what was going to happen. And he knew that Esau was not going to value his birthright, but actually sell it.
Yes, he despised his birthright. And so let's pick up our drama right here, the biblical story, where we see the despising of the birthright and how man's will is intertwined with God's sovereignty, and God fulfills his sovereign will in Israel.
And the sons of Isaac grew. Esau became a cunning hunter, a man of the field, while Jacob was a quiet man, dwelling in tents. One day Esau came from the field and was weak from hunger.
הלעיטני נא מן האדום האדום הזה.
בכלה לי כיום את בכורתך.
הנה אנוכי רעב, למה לי בכורה.
יישבע לי כיום.
נשבע, לך בכורתי.
I understand this is controversial, but it needs to be stated. The God of Islam is not the same as the God of Judaism and Christianity. In fact, Muhammad chose one of the 360 pagan gods in the desert, Allah, and made him the center of his religion. And his own proclivities, his own issues, his own problems have been reproduced generation after generation, so much so that we're seeing all kinds of problems throughout the world today based on the tenets of Islam. I'm sorry to say that, but there is deliverance. There is hope because of Yeshua. You know, how do I know that they're not the same God? You bump it up to a different authority. Ergun Kaner, who's been on our program, an Arab scholar, a believer in Yeshua, former Muslim, he says that in 51 debates with Muslims, not one of them has ever claimed that these are the same God or that the Quran and the Bible are the same kind of a book. They don't claim it themselves privately. Now, for political reasons, we hear about a religion of peace and we hear about the moderate middle. I'm waiting for the moderate middle to stand up and stand against the terror, stand against the irrational and terroristic parts of Islam. I'm looking forward to that. I believe it's going to be a wonderful day when the moderate middle of Islam stands up for what is right. But this all comes back to the despising of the birthright. Did Jacob steal the birthright? Yes and no. God prophesied that he would be the one that through whom the line of faith would come. And Jacob, in his personality, even though he had all these problems, he was one who really went after the things of God. He never gave up, and we'll see that later in the story. He would wrestle with God for that which was his, or what he believed was his. So in a sense, it's the interplay again of the sovereignty of God and the will of man. Because Esau despised his birthright. In fact, it says, Vayivez Esav et habechorah, and Esau despised his birthright. That's restated in Hebrews 12:18, where he's spoken of as a profane man. Profane in this sense meaning worldly, one who turned away from the things of God and the promise of God and turned to the things of this world and instant gratification. That's the whole thing about the mess of pottage. God help us that we would never give up the call that's upon us and the destiny that God has for us for some trivial thing in this world. We have a much greater calling. You do and I do. And we need to follow that out. And that's what Jacob was doing. He was reaching for that. There's such a difference in these two pathways. The Quran is divided into surahs, what we would call verses or chapters. And the Surah 112 speaks about Allah as being the being who does not beget. He does not have a son. In fact, on the Dome of the Rock behind me, it says on the outside, there is no God but Allah and he has no son. Well, we know that there is a Father, a Son, and a Holy Spirit That's the truth of the Godhead. And so that surah is in complete contradiction to what the Bible teaches us about who Yeshua is. It also says that Jesus wasn't crucified and that Ishmael was brought up to the mountain, not Isaac, by Abraham. There are some real contradictions between the Quran and the Bible. And truthfully, the only book on the planet that has a prophetic edge where God says something and then he fulfills it, and it's our job to believe it, is the Bible. It's the only book like it. It's the only supernatural book on planet Earth.
The truth on top of the Temple Mount.
Yeah.
I loved your teaching, Miles.
Thank you.
Yeah, it was really clear. You know, God's Word is the prophetic book that tells us the end from the beginning. You
Exactly
know,
right.
I've heard you say many times, God says it, then he does it, and it's our job to believe it.
That's the way it works.
Yeah.
And really this whole controversy about the stealing of the birthright, you know, as a Jewish person, it gets under my skin. But, you know, you too, yeah?
Well, exactly. Esau just didn't value the birthright, and he was just valuing that he wanted to eat right away.
Right.
You know, maybe there might have been some scheming there on Jacob's part, but at the same time, there's a warning in Hebrews that we cannot be like Esau. Or please don't be like Esau. You know, and not valuing, not esteeming your birthright, but putting the value in what God has for us as his children.
Exactly so. And it's really important today, you know, the way the news is coloring things and the problems that we see with the news media today, the despising of the birthright. We see it being played out in the delegitimizing of Israel, in the demonization of the Jewish people, and the disinformation that's coming through the news media to try to make a different story out of what is biblical history, archaeological history, scientific fact, and it's coming very strong. And so it's important that we stay close to the book. And one of the great things that we get to do as a ministry is to support the archaeological work that's going on in Israel. Through our benevolence funds, we're able to stand with archaeologists as they unearth these incredible artifacts that really prove scientifically what's already here in the prophetic word. Let's go to an interview with Mark Levitt and Sar El Ofek at the City of David, where God is unearthing treasures to verify his own word.
Speaking of urban legends and ground zero, what would you say to doubting Thomases who, despite this archaeology, this evidence, suppose that the Bible isn't authentic?
I study Bible. If we ask ourselves about the authenticity of the Bible, we have to know several things. First of all, yes, the Bible was probably written by all kind of different people along the human history.
Yes.
Yet, this still brings us some real amazing truths about who we are thousands of years later. So, when we speak about Jeremiah, when we try to understand Jerusalem, when we see it with our own eyes, if we doubt these facts, we must doubt who we are in general. We must ask ourselves, if we doubt that, then what do we have for certain? For those people who see facts and dismiss them as lies, I can say what Galileo Galilei said: there's not a bigger hatred than the hatred of the ignorance to the wisdom.
What could you do to make things even better here?
First of all, we need to excavate more in order to find more, because knowledge is power eventually. And by seeing, by knowing, by understanding, we can tell better the story of this place and to understand better the identity of who we are, even in the 21st century. So we need to excavate more. We need people to understand the significance of this place and not to be afraid to come and see. So far, we've excavated only a small part of this huge site. And it will take years and years. And we have to remember that there are people who live here, and you cannot just dig underneath their houses. So everything has to be according to the law and in the right time, the right place. It will take a lot of time.
And every time we go back to Israel, there's more unearthing that's taking place. In fact, I think since we were there in the fall, there's been the discovery of a first century Messianic synagogue.
So exciting.
The work that was taking place in the Galilee during Yeshua's time, they're starting to see the unearthing of that particular synagogue.
Right.
It's phenomenal.
Right.
You know, we're really seeing in this section of the story the outplaying of that verse that says in the Hebrew, Vayomer Adonai Shnei Goyim Bevitnech. There are two nations wrestling in your womb.
Right.
And the wrestling is going to continue as we see the day of the Lord approaching. It's not going to change. In fact, prophetically, in the book of Obadiah, in verse 21, God tells us that there's going to be controversy between Edom, who is Esau, and Israel, Jacob, until the victory comes to the children of Israel over the children of Edom. That victory will happen. It's in the scripture, and it is shaping up now in the day in which we live. And it's our job to stand with Israel, with the Jewish people, and with the Lord himself as he stands for Israel. He is the one who never sleeps nor slumbers. He's watching over Israel. We have the privilege of standing with him as he does. So, till we see you again, as always, we want to remind you, please, Sha'alu Shalom Yerushalayim.
And pray for the peace of Jerusalem.
Our resource on this program, the booklet, Israel's Right to the Land. In appreciation for your donation of $10 or more, we'll send you this booklet that answers the question, what right does Israel have to its land? Here you will find abundant evidence from the scriptures that directly addresses 12 key issues, resolving this topic once and for all. Call 1-800-WONDERS and ask for Israel's Right to the Land, or visit us at levitt.com. Our monthly newsletter, The Levitt Letter, is free and full of insightful articles and news commentary from a messianic perspective. Visit levitt.com to find our newsletter, along with current and past programs, our television schedule, and much more. Your donations to Zola Levitt Ministries help these organizations bless Israel. Please remember, Zola Levitt Ministries depends on tax-deductible donations from viewers like you.
This has been a paid program brought to you by Zola Levitt Ministries.